the British intelligence services essentially, for a long time, closed a blind eye, which they've done in other areas, because of that capital investment. And you know, the antipathy, as with Germany and a lot of Europeans, to deal with these issues, right? It's always been safe to allow the United States to be the pushback. Obviously, Trump is changing that to a degree. But yes, you see the change in tenor in Boris Johnson. But at the same time, I think it's important not to underestimate how powerful those interlinks are. And certainly in the Brexit environment, the British government is looking for continued economic investment, opportunity, stability. It's something to remain. You see this with the British, even the Asian Investment and Infrastructure Bank, which is, you know, a Chinese government cutout, and they still decided to suckle on that teat. So, you know, it's a Russian money, Russian influence. The final point to make very quickly, and if we should mention this earlier, because of UK defamation law, and because there's no comparative FBI, the Russians are scared of the FBI to a degree, at least in the organised crime environment. They are not scared of a new Scotland Yard organised crime for a number of reasons, partly because it's much more corrupt, but also defamation law in the UK. It's very dangerous for a British reporter to write about this stuff, which is why it hasn't been written about that much, unless it is in vague terms, because they worry if they write about it, they might get into a car crash the next week. And that it won't be investigated, and the British state won't back them up, or their newspaper will get sued for everything.
Thank you for the presentation, first of all. My question is on the policy side, for any policy prescriptions that you perhaps, if you were appointed today to be the Russia NSC, what would be your policy recommendation for the
Can you hear this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, in the reorganization of the NSC, it's not clear there actually is a Russia guy, and I'm certainly not volunteering to be that guy. I think the first thing that has to happen is we need to have a robust policy discussion about who's actually in charge. I mean, we know what the answer to that question is, but given the incredibly mixed messages we're getting from top leadership of different cabinet departments and agencies, the first thing there has to have happen is some agreement on discipline on what the messaging is to calm down our allies. And believe me, I'm sure the Russians are absolutely as confused as our allies are. Right, I mean, we forget this. I mean, it would be very dangerous for them to think that what the president says is actual U.S. policy, because clearly it's not, or at least it's complicated. So getting one message together on Russia would be the first job.
What's Russia's relation to Turkey right now, especially as Turkey has become more radicalized and more single power?
Russia and Turkey are never going to be friends for a ton of historical reasons we can't get into here. That said, the risk of real clash between Erdogan and Putin last year over Syria has receded. It's very clear the Russians have acquiesced in some of the things they didn't like about the Erdogan regime and vice versa. The Turks, for instance, have been remarkably quiet about the Tatar community in Crimea, which is now part of Russia. They used to beat the drum about that. They don't anymore. And, you know, I think it's far-fetched to say that Erdogan and Putin are cooperating in anything more than a short-term or tactical sense, but they've agreed to disagree on a lot of things, and the Turks have largely accepted that the Syrian civil war is in its dying stages, and the Russians won. And the Turks want to carve out what they can, but they are not fundamentally going to challenge that. And I got to tell you, this is very bad news. I mean, this is very bad news for NATO in the sense that you know, the Turks are now talking about buying S-400 missile systems from the Russians, which that'll be an interesting thing. And I think everyone from a NATO planning perspective has to have a lot of questions about what's really going on.
Yeah, just to add on that, I think the lesson of that Erdogan took from with a coup attempt, but also the fact that the Russians had throttled the strategic initiative in Syria, was that if you want influence, which clearly they have a lot of concern about because of the Kurdish separatist movements or Kurdish expansionist movements in northern Iraq and Syria, they decided to, you know, that Putin was the necessary, you know, kneel to the throne, at least in that short-term sense.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Some of the Kurdish groups have had ties to Moscow going back to Soviet times, and the Russians have the ability to turn up the heat there anytime they want, and Ankara fully understands that. And the Turks do not have that degree of asymmetric threat card to play against the Russians.
Yes, ma'am.
Review what you said about Trump and his relationship with Russia. What are your thoughts on that?
Do you have a couple days? No. Oh, well, there you go. I am reluctant to characterize it beyond it's very strange. It's been noted countless times and many others that the president won't seem to criticize Russia about anything. And once again, this is not the tenor of other senior members of his own administration, but the president himself is of one mind about Russia, and that's that, you know, we can be friends and Putin's a great guy because he likes me. That is not productive to having a real debate about what our relationship with Russia should be, which doesn't have to be hostile, by the way. I don't think Russia's ever going to be our friend. But there probably are areas where we can find common ground. But I don't think the way of doing that is being dishonest about what Russia's agenda actually in places like Syria and elsewhere really is.
What does Russia want for Syria?
No, they've gotten what they wanted. They've kept their client state intact, which will rule over part of Syria for the indefinite future. And they've sent an indelible message. Let me be fundamentally clear here. Russia has sent the message that no matter how badly you behave, if you're our client, we will be there for you. Remember what Barack Obama did to President Mubarak. Let him be thrown to the wolves after 35 years of close alliance with the United States. Putin will take your phone call no matter what an SOB you are. And everyone in the region got that message loud and clear.
And just to add, that message matters so much, especially on the part of the Sunni Arab monarchies, because of their paranoia about Iran, which is paranoia. I mean, there's rational concern, obviously, but the paranoia is a very, very effective weapon in Putin's arsenal to manipulate. And I think President Obama, you know, was extremely arrogant about the power of that paranoia in that region. And we'll see what Trump.
Yeah, and I'll conclude by saying, if you look at a country like Egypt, which has made, you know, moves toward not an alliance with Russia, but they've restored some of their military ties and security relationships in a way that was unthinkable from 1981 until a couple of years ago. We've seen no move from the current administration in Washington to really undo any of that. So it's, you know, that Putin has, it's not that Putin controls the Middle East, but Russia has its footprint there and has a seat at any table far bigger than they've had in decades.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks for coming.